hello. Thank you again for coming at short notice. So the reason why we called this is, as I said in the Slack channel, basically FIP 100 has been a FIP that has been on a fast schedule because it was an attempt to fix a pressing problem, which was rising onboarding gas costs after the August update. The solution that the FIP authors settled on was to do an overhaul of and jump in, FIP authors, if I'm completely misrepresenting you, but to do an overhaul of not only kind of moving onboarding value accrual to away from something that was related to gas costs, so it wouldn't push up the baseline, but also come up with a system that would be a better system long term, which was to move that to a fee. This process was complicated and worked at a pretty fast pace, but I think everybody understood that this was something that was going to affect a bunch of folks. So that was a proactive attempt. I'd like to thank the FIP authors for doing this, but also Jing and a bunch of other people to try and make sure that people knew what was going on. I would say that people did know what was going on, but there was a lot of unclearness, what was going to happen. And I think people were broadly positive, surprisingly positive, given that it was a crypto economic FIP. Then so at some point I kind of assumed that like maybe we wouldn't need a core devs discussion on this. Then last week, which was the last week of last call, there was a sort of last attempt to say, look, this is coming, and that had some numbers in it which were higher than people expected, and so that prompted a lot of discussion, a bunch of people coming in, very, very coherently, very, sometimes you just face this moment where everybody is in a bad mood about these things, and like it's very hard to pick around what might be improvable. But people really came up with like really good points about both technical stuff, but mostly about equity, right? About like, this is something where we will end up paying twice. This is something that will affect who bears this burden. And also, like, is this going to last forever? Like, what is the status of this? So that was kind of where I pinged Lucky and said, okay, I feel like we're losing consensus. Maybe we need to have a core devs meeting to crack that. Subsequent to me pinging Lucky, the governance team asked the FIP authors if they would respond to the criticisms that people have made. The FIP authors went back, and by FIP authors, I mean Molly, Irene, and the team at Philoz. They came back with some proposals, which I think Molly has documented in the core devs. And if you go to the comments now, people seem, I mean, it's very hard to tell, but people in the last couple of days have been, okay, all right, this is like a couple of, primarily the main person, Beck, who is an SP, was the person who said, actually, I'm going to oppose this and raise the flag to other people. Beck has commented saying, okay, thank you for making these changes. So my vibes feeling at this point is that consensus has returned on this. So I would love your input, certainly if you don't feel that, but I think that there's a little less pressure on this team to try and thrash out some additional consensus or core consensus after that. Molly, I don't know whether you have anything to a little bit more color to the technical side of this, because that's all very vibes and governance.
Yeah, I mean, one of there's a good amount of that required, and thanks, Danny, for stewarding and helping surface and make it concrete so that we could respond and find a compromise path forward. Maybe like the technicalities of kind of what's proposed and what kind of like desired next steps are that would love alignment with this group here is to make a set of compromise edits to the FIP. It's already a very compromisey FIP, but adjusting the kind of like actual fee value to 25% lower value to kind of respond to the feedback there and to create a kind of like exemption window for people to observe, respond, negotiate new loan agreements with their loan providers, etc., for 3 months to or 3 months tilde, because might not happen on the exact 3-month time frame, to have this not apply to extended existing sectors that already paid gas fees in the past and need more time to respond to this changing conditions. Especially a subset of them are in I want to extend this pretty regularly, which is a tax that they're also paying in the system right now. The third component, which was Danny's suggestion, which I think we're very excited about and want to also use as a kind of like general new technique or tool in the core devs toolbox, is convening kind of a review committee to explicitly review the performance of this in kind of like roughly 3-month like quarterly review sessions. Obviously, we can review it faster than that if new data comes up. So we'll kind of keep a channel going and be able to drop new observations and issues into it. But kind of explicitly be like, is this performing as we expected? If it's not performing as we expected, does it need amendment? Does it need reversion? And just like explicitly create a space to not be like, great, that is the status quo and we are never going to think about it ever again, but like iterate forward with data. One of the challenges of all economic FIPs and this FIP in particular is it's trying to estimate a whole ton of things that our simulation tools are only so good at predicting. And it's very likely that the baseline network conditions that we modeled like 5 different parameter sets on, that like none of them is accurate, because each one of them is like kind of a like linear progression of like, let's assume these conditions and model it forward. Let's assume these other conditions and not let's have a yo-yo with like different people doing different things in the network and trade wars and all of the other things that like the network is actually responding to in practice in real life. So the third component there is we will use this committee to specifically amend, revert, or propose new FIPs that modify this over time. And I think given those things, we've seen kind of support across some of the critics of this original proposal to move forward with that sort of review space. I think that would include some members of core devs to be a part of that committee. It would also include some of those critics to be a part of that. And we would use the discussion issue to surface what are important data points or flags that we should be monitoring as part of that review process. I think that's generally very healthy from a network perspective in terms of giving us the ability to like iterate and respond with real data instead of getting bogged down in discussions without the ability to test and iterate and try things. Obviously, like we're going to have some amount of latency in the observing of signals in this as well, given the kind of exemption window. So that will be a signal as well, that it might take us a little bit longer to observe robust signals from the network if a subset of SPs are not experiencing the change conditions because we've exempted these existing sectors for 3 months to move forward and not incur new fee conditions on extension. Anywho, that's maybe an overview of kind of where we're at. Proposed change, if this moves forward and we feel good about this, would be to start the NV25 code freeze tomorrow with these changes. We have a PR up that Irina and I are both helping make edits and reviews to right now that would adjust the FIP to document these changes in this path forward. and move it out of last call and include it with this explicit review cycle to see whether or not we change it in the future. So that's context.
I have some more comments on the review cycle thing to make that actually work, but maybe this is the point to sort of open up for questions or comments. um, anyone? Anyone? I can talk a little bit about the review thing because I think people do like that, but I wanted to set some parameters both for you folks and for the structure of it, in that review committee will be making recommendations to core devs. So my hope here is that one of the dynamics that people do not like is that our expertise and our FIP authors are naturally quite closely connected. In that, like, someone will produce, Philos will produce a FIP and go, oh, and like we have crunched these numbers, and people are like, yeah, you've crunched the numbers. We don't know where, like, you could be just juking these stats. So, which you're not, by the way. I feel confident of that, but like, it's important that people feel confident too. So one of the things that we want to do with this committee, and I've got tentative approval from the foundation, is to allow them a little bit of funding to commission either independent research or give more specific instructions to Crypto Economic Lab going, actually, or David Gasquez, we want to monitor this. I would love input on some suggestions going into that committee of things that you would like to monitor on this. I think one of the ones from the SPs that I anticipate is the thing that provokes the strongest reaction, understandably, because they're business people with very tight profit margins, is number go up or down? Like the cost that we spend on onboarding now and versus the fee costs, which of those is bigger? Like how much are we going to lose? And the FIP authors were pretty honest in going, it depends. Like, there are some very question marks about what the future is going to be, and there are some question marks about what your current practice is. So I would love to suggest sort of a commission, a thing to actually monitor that. The SPs, I thought I'll pass Molly in a moment, but the SPs actually, the ones I talked to, including Beck, including other skeptical people, realized that, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? This thing would have to move around. They just wanted to know what it was, and if it was too high, they would push back. But they do want, this is the sort of stuff that really determines whether they think that this is something that's going to work or not. Okay, Molly, sorry. Back to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to write it as a chat comment, but it's a little a thing that I think that in getting people to create like a side-by-side dashboard with historical data is going to be really interesting, but it's also not quite as easy as like I look at what I paid today, March 13th, and then I look at what the cost is, June whatever, and I'm like, great, that's my delta, because actually it'll be based on, what is the current expected block reward curve, what is the onboarding rates, what would you have paid in gas fees at that point in time based on the performance of the network. And so we're actually going to need two lines, one that is like with FIP 100 and the other one's without FIP 100, and it's going to need to model both of those conditions. And it's, the big challenge we had in trying to calculate things like ROI was trying to model and estimate gas, which is exactly what SPs were yelling about, is like, I can't model and estimate gas, and it makes it very hard for me to plan my operations. It also makes it very hard for us to simulate costs and savings in the future, because that it's a very variable number. So yeah, it depends on a lot of factors. Agree with Axel. Obviously, it's easier to do that once we've seen a number of those factors happen, and then we can compute deltas, but just wanted to uh, I think this commissions a very useful monitoring dashboard, which is the kind of like with and without condition one. I think there's a lot of other parameters that we were interested in of like, what is the observed onboarding rate? What is, observed protocol revenue? What is observed SP growth rate of new SPs coming to the network, or, these other factors. And so those we have a number of those that Starboard is already working on from a monitoring dashboard perspective, but some of them are more complicated, like this one that we just were flagging and agree will require some extra level of expertise for doing kind of like the A/B modeling of what might have been, so that we have a correct counterfactual to compare against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to Kieran's point part of this is I think that the fear that SPs have, and frankly the fear that often FIP authors have, is like there is some bit of data that we don't know about, that like an SP will go, well, that when we're onboarding data, we do this. And you go, no, I had no idea. That completely changes everything. I think we got some useful information about why people renew sectors at a faster cadence. I mean, it intuitively made sense, but I think it was good to have that in the discussion, and that changed the VIP. Um, and
That in and of
that's
itself also indicates another monitoring dashboard that we probably would
yeah.
want, which is because, like, I don't know if anyone else knew that. I didn't know that there's a sizable community of storage providers that have sectors that are about, on track to expire, and they are just renewing them with like a 3-month window of remaining life as a cycle over and over, because it maximizes their optionality and liquidity to have those sectors all expire at once. And so they're effectively, once they get a sector to the end of its or past its 1.5-year lifetime, they're like adjusting to have all sectors have the same expiry date, I guess. Like, that's probably observable from the data if you grind that in enough. But again, I had like the pure number of extensions and the number of sectors that are like close to their extension window is something that we can observe. And that was like a very interesting feedback loop, like of like why people are doing that, um, and how it changes their behavior and ability to respond to take advantage of like discounts and improvements for being more long on like participation in the network.
So we've been talking a lot at you, and I just want to I'm happy to end this call early. Like I say, I feel like we've returned to having consensus as much as we can, like as much as any FIP does. Um, uh, Speak now or forever hold your peace. If you really are like, no, God, no, stop, don't do this. But I do feel like this is we're in a good place now, which was not necessarily the case a week ago. So, anyone?
Yeah, I just checked through like the discussions just to see like how many people at least like changed their mind compared to like previous statements, and I did at least see 3 to 4 people that raised concerns earlier that got their like concerns heard and like adjusted with the latest adjustments, and it seemed like they commented on the latest comment by Molly, I think, now in approval of the FIP. So I do think, and I think there was like a total of like 6 out of in total that like commented like were opposed to this FIP. So I do think like 4 that has changed their mind is a relatively good metric. There was one user, ND Labs. It would be maybe good. I think they got their concern heard with about like I think just the size of the fee, but it would be good to just have like check in on them and say like, hey, is this fine for you?
Yeah, so I reached out privately to some of the critics to say, would you be on this committee? And I didn't want to reveal anything because obviously, like, if you're a critic, like you shouldn't have to say you're going to be on this committee because that implies you're okaying it. But I have one person who has expressed support now, who's changed their position, who was interested in joining it, and one person who is a frequent critic of the entire system, but a positive critic, you know, and they politely declined, but it was polite. They were like, I just, you know, I would rather approach this from outside this system. So I think that at the very least that indicates that some folks will contribute to the committee because the failure mode there is like we pass it, people go, I didn't want this to pass. By the way, I anticipate if I go in and post saying it's passed, there will be a little bit of what? I didn't know that was going to happen. But I really did try and signal that this is in the process of it. At some point you have to have a deadline. But I do think that there is the committee can sustain itself and respond to the critics rather than just being moribund or kind of a bunch of people who like the FIP or invested in the FIP going, yeah, we think we're still right. So I just one more data point on this is that I think some of the critics, strongest critics, are willing to participate in the process going forward and will flag and will have the power to flag if it goes the way that they feared it would go.
You asked earlier about what should we measure, and I just had a comment on that. I think ideally it would be really nice to see batching, of course. We've done some measurements, or Irene has done some on that, but it would be good to confirm that, of course, after this happens, now that batching and aggregation always make sense, which they haven't done for a while in the Filecoin ecosystem. So that is at least one data point that I'm very interested in.
And maybe another thing would be like actual observed chain utilization per onboarding rate. Because I think our hypothesis is that we'll end up decreasing chain utilization because people are batching and aggregating all the time, which will kind of clearly signal that there is lots of space for even higher onboarding rates. So hopefully we see onboarding rates higher with a lower chain utilization rate. Anyone else have thoughts? Things we should monitor? No?
All right, Lucky.
I think if anyone's interested in joining that committee, maybe also flag that to Danny.
Now I have to actually get people to join it. So it will be a very light lift. My hope is it's really about getting ideas and concerns and then operationalizing those, and the foundation can take on some of that, the burden of actually kind of organizing. So
Great.
okay, I think that's consensus. So that's great.
Awesome. Okay then. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.